I've become increasingly fascinated with something I feel like God whispered in my ear the other day. And I was thinking about President Trump's peace tour. And it has occurred to me that our nation was so built around a stronghold of sin that it has taken a cultural wrecking ball. God is using a cultural wrecking ball to not just change culture. People have said this about Trump for years. He's a fighter. He's willing to burn things down. Got that. Understand that. That's evidence in his approach. The cultural wrecking ball, though, thing has been looked at from the perspective of the so-called culture war and DEI, but it is so much more than that. Sin starts with an idea. It's a notion, and then it becomes a fascination or an obsession, and then that becomes a plan, and it becomes actions. And sometimes it starts as one sin and then branches out into others. You have a sin, then you lie about the sin, then you ask other people to lie about the sin. Now you are wishing you didn't do this. You wish your life was simple, and now it's coveting. And eventually these things become strongholds. Strongholds meaning strongholds of the demonic. I'm looking at the resistance to President Trump trying to bring peace to the world. And it's a stronghold. People don't want this stuff to change. President Trump, speaking in Saudi Arabia, talked about the nation builders.
Before our eyes, a new generation of leaders is transcending the ancient conflicts of tired divisions of the past and forging a future where the Middle East is defined by commerce, not chaos, where it exports technology, not terrorism, and where people of different nations, religions, and creeds are building cities together, not bombing each other out of existence. We don't want that.
That man spoke of exporting terrorism in Saudi Arabia, which helped pay for 9/11, which helped shelter people involved in it. And that's bravery. President Trump doesn't change. You're not supposed to say such things in the Middle East, but President Trump did in pursuit of peace, a cultural wrecking ball, I think selected by God to wreck broken cultures or to destroy strongholds, and the president continued. See the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia.
It's crucial for the wider world to note this great transformation has not come from Western interventionists or flying people in beautiful planes giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. No, the gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by the so-called nation builders, neocons, or liberal nonprofits like those who spent trillions and trillions of dollars failing to develop Kabul, Baghdad, so many other cities. Instead, the birth of a modern Middle East has been brought by the people of the region themselves, the people that are right here, the people that have lived here all their lives, developing your own sovereign countries, pursuing your own unique visions and charting your own destinies in your own way. It's really incredible what you've done. In the end, the so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built.
It's a beautiful statement. And you could say it was misled policy, and it was, but what else was it? It was Joe Biden's brother, who had no experience in construction to this level, getting paid money to build homes, temporary homes for our troops. Now, the CEO of BlackRock was there, which worries me because, of course, BlackRock owns everything and has absolutely no caring for America whatsoever under that particular leadership. And they're also pragmatic psychopaths. They understand that power has shifted, and that President Trump, a cultural wrecking ball, is empowered. They probably don't respect the spiritual nature of this. God lifts leaders up, and he takes leaders down. And in this case, he's chosen to lift President Trump up, I think, to break strongholds. The sin of theft, stealing our money, becomes the sin of lying about stealing our money. Becomes the sin of causing other people to lie, separating them from God. Becomes the sin of greed to hold on to this. And these sins multiply, and our nation's capital became a stronghold of sin. And it extends into everything. If you've ever lived there, spent any time living there, you'll understand that there are a different set of morals in Washington, D.C. than there are in the rest of the country. That there are sins that are looked upon poorly around the rest of the country. There they are popular. It's a similar thing to San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, but that's really just concentrated on sexual sin. And DC, it spreads the gambit. It's become this stronghold. So I'm just seeing in my mind strongholds seem to me like these massive concrete walls of sin and President Trump. And I don't even think intentionally. It is his wrecking ball of culture that's showing the sin of always on war, choosing that over peace. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will inherit the kingdom of heaven. And he is having an effect, and God is working through him to have an effect, to force the hands of people like Keir Starmer. Wait until you hear Keir Starmer's sudden realization about mass migration and legal only through pretense, not really legal. And details absolutely matter. The details of our body matter. They are so specific, so well designed, so beautiful that it's so frustrating to me that there are surgeons who continue to think that every single injury means you need to be re-injured. That's what surgery is. It's a re-injury. It's the cutting into of body parts. It continues to frustrate me that we still rely on echocardiograms or what's a hard tap, sending wires up our bodies to go examine our hearts when there are alternative technologies to determine if you're going to have a heart attack. Some reason it's not expected here. It's not allowed here. In many cases, it's illegal here. Or take, for instance, the manipulated stem cells that they use at Renew. And they do all the other things, in relation to the heart, screening out heart attacks, etc. I go to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico for real healthcare. I elevate my healthcare there. If you think you might have genetic tendencies for a heart attack, they can tell you if you're going to have one. They've saved 3 of my viewer-listeners' lives. If you've been told that it's back surgery or pills for the rest of your life, that might not be true. Go to renew.healthcare. They'll tell you if they can help you and what it will cost. It's RENUE.healthcare. Take care of the details of your body. Elevate your healthcare, elevate your life. Keir Starmer, is it trying to elevate his political career or to keep it afloat? He has noticed the sea change in politics driven by a cultural wrecking ball who God put back in power in the United States of America after a 4-year respite so that Americans could observe what a fully spiritually captured non-president is like, what the machine is like. In other words, what happens when the stronghold runs the stronghold. Keir Starmer has had a realization.
These rules become even more important. Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together. So when you have an immigration system that seems almost designed to permit abuse, that encourages some businesses to bring in lower paid workers rather than invest in our young people, or simply one that is sold by politicians to the British people on an entirely false premise, then you're not championing growth, you're not championing justice, or however else people defend the status quo. You're actually contributing to the forces that are slowly pulling our country apart. So yes, I believe in this. I believe we need to reduce immigration significantly.
How can you be that empty? That one week you're filled with, well, we know that mass immigration is our strength. And then very next week, we need to reduce immigration. It's the same views that he suddenly changed on the topic of gender confusion. He was pro-gender confusion, and then he was anti-gender confusion. President Trump, this cultural wrecking ball, doesn't change. God is unchanging and unchangeable to a degree that doesn't compare to us because he is God. Magnificently greater. President Trump can shift a position, have his mind change, but his core doesn't change. He's a cultural wrecking ball, selected to be that by God as our president. And there are people who cannot stand this, both in politics, in office, and around office. This is an MSNBC political analyst, Donna Edwards, and she's talking about immigration. She has a view on letting people in from South Africa, people who are being sentenced to being unalived eventually, because white farmers are being unalived in South Africa.
Well, in my view, what makes it different is that they are white South Africans. The president, in my view, has not hidden his racism behind a bushel. In fact, in his policies, whether it's removing government workers or, in this case, admitting white South Africans while denying refugee status, asylum seekers from other countries, principally Central and South American and Black nations, to come into this country. And so I think that, this policy, while it's not surprising in this action, really speaks of the underlying message in this that disrespects and shows disdain for people of color while embracing these Afrikaners now, and also expediting the process by which they can come into the country while denying that same process to other refugees.
Let's peel back a little bit. What was the refugee program under figurehead Biden? There wasn't one. You said you're a refugee. They admitted you as a refugee. There was no investigation, no background checks, no looking into your story. You said the word, you were that person, you were released into the country without anything of a check. People show up at the border with kids. It used to be that we checked the DNA to make sure that they're actually related to the kids. They stopped that. That was a purposeful decision to let people bring children into the country who weren't theirs. It's a purposeful decision to create a system that can be exploited by traffickers. It's purposeful. President Trump, a cultural wrecking ball, comes in, empowered, I think, by God, placed here by God to be a cultural wrecking ball, and he looks at the dysfunction of this and the corruption of this. So we're going to stop the refugee programs from these countries for now, because we're trying to figure out what the NGOs had done, who's in the country, who came in under cover of being a refugee and weren't refugees. We're, in fact, perhaps military-age people here to disrupt us. It makes sense. And it required a cultural wrecking ball to do this? In the Bible, we read in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. You will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Now, here you're talking about spiritual rest, ultimate rest, eternal rest with the Lord Jesus, having him carry your burdens. And people can sense when unfair burdens are put upon them. This is also part of President Trump's strength, is somehow he can sense this as well and communicate it. In Saudi Arabia, President Trump talked about a Rasmussen poll.
Spirit in the United States right now. A brand new poll from Rasmussen just showed that the number of Americans who believe the nation is on the right track, they have a right track, wrong track, is now the highest in over 20 years. And it hasn't been anything like this because for many years it was the wrong track. And I can tell you for the last 4 years it was definitely the wrong track, but it's the highest it's been in many, many years.
There is a phrase from the Bible, and I didn't get it out, so I can't quote it exactly, but when the righteous reign, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the people moan. There's been a ton of moaning over the past 4 years. I don't think enough of it. But people are waking up from this. And it took a cultural wrecking ball, God's cultural wrecking ball, I think, to go in, and we're thinking it's tax rates and it's illegal immigration and it's also world peace and people who don't want your world peace, part of the stronghold. It's also a corrupt immigration system and wrecking the stronghold. It's corrupted parents and corrupt media. More than any president in history, President Trump has revealed what the media is and what it has become. Jake Tapper recently wrote a book, and he's now out promoting it. Jake Tapper is promoting a fiction that the media was fooled. And it's a fact of the matter. Jake Tapper chose to be fooled. He chose to repeat the lies. He did it willingly. He did it within 8 days. He interviewed one Trump, Laura Trump, and she said that Biden was chronically mentally declined, and Jake Tapper about kicked her off the show, jumped down her throat. Then he interviewed a Trump family member whose name I can't recall, who does not like President Trump, and she said that a psychiatrist had determined that was wrong with her uncle cognitively, though he never met him, and Jake Tapper listened with interest. No one was fooled. It took a cultural wrecking ball to show this to us. Media is part of the stronghold. When was the last time you truly praised God for destroying a stronghold of sin. And that is, in my mind, exactly what Washington, D.C. had become.